My parents abandoned my 8-year-old son at a church, all because I wouldn't fork over $30,000, 0 cents, to my deadbeat brother for his shady crypto scam. They told my kid I didn't want him anymore. Can you believe that? Hey, I'm Emma Wilson, and I live just outside of Chicago with my 6-year-old son Tommy. I'm a single mom, trying to keep it together after losing my husband 2 years ago. Most days I'm juggling motherhood, running a small graphic design business, and doing my best to stay afloat in a world that doesn't cut much slack for women like me. Life was already hard. Grief doesn't come with an off switch, and bills sure don't care if your heart's broken. But I never imagined the worst betrayal I'd face wouldn't come from strangers or clients or even life itself, but from my own family. Growing up, my parents, George and Linda Smith, had a clear favorite. My younger brother Eric could crash a car, lie about it, and still be met with warm hugs and second chances. Meanwhile, I was the one expected to hold it all together, to be quiet, to be strong, to be understanding no matter how much it hurt. That pattern followed us into adulthood like a curse I couldn't shake. I built my life from the ground up, brick by brick, while Eric floated through one failed business idea after another, always with a new excuse and a fresh handout request. I kept my distance, mostly to protect my peace. But 3 months ago, it all came crashing down. Eric showed up again, desperate and smiling like he wasn't the same guy who skipped our dad's birthday last year and borrowed $5,000, 0 cents, he never paid back. He asked me for $30,000, 0 cents. That it was for a huge crypto opportunity and that I was standing in the way of his future. If I didn't help, I said no. And I meant it. What happened next broke something inside me that I didn't even know was still whole. Because it wasn't just cold shoulders or passive-aggressive silence this time. It was something darker, something cruel. My refusal to help my brother financially turned into a punishment I never expected. And the target wasn't, it was my son, my 6-year-old little boy who loved his grandparents and trusted them. I still can't believe what they did to him. But I'm going to tell you every piece of it, because people need to understand that sometimes the real danger isn't out there, it's the people who share your last name. So get comfortable, because what comes next, it's not just a story. It's the moment everything changed. So let's rewind for a second. From the outside, we looked like the typical suburban Chicago family. White picket fence, manicured lawn, dad mowing on Sundays, mom waving from the porch. But behind that polished image was a home built on uneven ground. Eric was the golden boy. Always was. He could crash a bike and get a new one the next day, no questions asked. He could bring home a D on a report card and be praised for trying his best. Meanwhile, I'd get straight A's and be told that's what was expected. If I ever said anything, if I ever dared point out the difference in how we were treated, Mom would smile and say, "Emma, Eric's sensitive. You're strong." And just like that, strength became my prison. It was their excuse to let me fend for myself. I stopped asking for help pretty early. By 15, I was working part-time after school and saving every penny. I hustled my way into college with a scholarship in graphic design. While I was learning to take care of myself, Eric was flunking out of college after college, racking up tuition bills my parents covered without blinking. They didn't even hide it. It was like watching someone live life on easy mode while I played on the hardest setting with no extra lives. But still, I pushed forward. In college, I met James Wilson, this sweet, quiet architecture student who loved that I was ambitious. He cheered me on. He saw me. We got married, had Tommy, and built something real. A home that didn't revolve around favoritism or guilt. James was the kind of dad who read bedtime stories in silly voices and cooked pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He was everything my parents weren't. And then, just like that, he was gone. A freak construction site accident took him from us when Tommy was only 4. That was 2 years ago, and I haven't had a real breath since. Grieving while raising a little boy is a special kind of pain. I became everything: mom, dad, provider, protector, all while trying not to fall apart myself. I kept going because I had to for Tommy. My parents, they showed up in bursts, a little babysitting here and there, but always distracted. Always worried about Eric's latest big idea. There was the food truck dream, the dating app that never launched, the house flip that ended in a lawsuit. All flops, all bankrolled by their retirement fund. I didn't say anything. It wasn't my business. Or so I told myself. I kept the peace, mostly for Tommy. He loved his grandparents. To him, they were warm hugs and birthday presents and Sunday cookies. I didn't want to take that from him, even though, deep down, I knew their love came with strings. It always had. The kind of love that had expectations built into every gesture. The kind that asked you to look the other way when things weren't fair. And then came the phone call from Eric, the one that changed everything. He needed $30,000, 0 cents. Said it was a one-time ask, a chance to invest in a crypto mining startup with some guys he met on a Discord server. It's legit, he said. It's already blowing up in Europe. I don't even know how he said it with a straight face. I told him no, clearly and firmly. I didn't yell, I didn't shame him. I just said I couldn't. Every dollar I made was tied up in rent, groceries, Tommy's school, and trying to grow my business. I told him I couldn't put my son's future at risk for a maybe. He hung up without another word. I didn't think much of it until Mom called the next day, and her tone was ice cold. "You know your brother's trying," she said, like that was enough. I stayed calm, told her again gently that I couldn't help this time, that I loved Eric, but this wasn't something I could afford. That's when she said something that made my stomach twist. "You've always thought you were better than him. Maybe it's time you learned a little humility." I hung up and sat there for a long time, wondering what exactly they expected of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something in my gut told me the ground was shifting. I didn't know yet how far they'd go. I didn't know that my refusal to save Eric from another disaster would make them decide I was the problem. But I would find out soon, and it would break something in me that might never fully heal. It all came to a head 3 months ago when Eric showed up at my front door, out of nowhere, wearing some designer jacket I knew he couldn't afford, sunglasses on indoors like he was somebody important. I was knee-deep in a design project for a new client, deadline looming, and Tommy was at school. The second I saw Eric walk in, I knew he wanted something. He always did. After pretending to care about how I'd been, he launched into his pitch. "Emma, this is huge. Crypto's exploding. There's a new coin called Secure Coin. You get in now, you triple your money by summer." He paced the room while talking fast, waving his phone at me with a bunch of graphs and Reddit screenshots that looked like they were made by a 14-year-old. "All I need is 30 grand, he said like he was asking for 20 bucks. I nearly choked on my coffee. 30,000? Are you serious, Eric? He swore up and down it was a sure thing. Promised I'd get 50 back, maybe more. He talked about anonymous founders and early-stage exclusivity like he actually understood what he was saying, but I knew better. I nodded along, but that night, after Tommy was asleep, I started digging into it. Secure Coin wasn't even listed on any major exchange. The website had typos, no real names, no verified data, just a bunch of empty buzzwords. It screamed scam. The next day, Eric called again, impatient. "So, you in or what?" I told him the truth. "No, Eric, it's a scam. You should get out while you can." That's when he lost it. Accused me of being selfish, of trying to sabotage him, said I was always jealous of him, that Mom and Dad were right about me being cold and bitter. Then he hung up. I thought that was the end of it, just another Eric tantrum. But I was wrong. He went straight to our parents, and within hours, I was getting bombarded with calls and texts. "How could you turn your back on your brother?" Mom cried over voicemail. "You've always hated his success," Dad spat over the phone, like Eric's list of failures suddenly counted as achievements. I tried to explain calmly that I wasn't being heartless, that I was just protecting my son's future, and that I'd even help Eric find a real, stable investment. But they weren't interested in logic. They didn't want truth. They wanted obedience. A week later, my dad called me with a voice like ice. "We're mortgaging the house to support Eric," he said. "Family supports family. You've made your choice, Emma. You've abandoned us. And now, you'll face consequences." Thought it was just more of their usual guilt tactics. I didn't think much of it until everything spiraled into something I never could have imagined. One Thursday, I pulled up to Tommy's school for a pickup. The parking lot was half empty, the playground quiet, and the crossing guard already walking off. My stomach sank. I rushed inside, and his teacher, Miss Brown, looked confused when I asked where he was. "Your parents picked him up early," she said. "They said it was a family emergency." My mouth went dry. I hadn't talked to my parents since that last argument. Why would they take Tommy without asking? I called my mom. No answer. My dad. No answer. Eric. Straight to voicemail. That sick feeling spread fast. I knew something was wrong. I drove to their house. Empty. Knocked on every neighbor's door, nothing. I called every hospital in the area, nothing. And then, hours later, my phone rang. A soft-spoken voice on the other end said, "Hi, this is Father David from St. Augustine's Church. I believe I have your son." I nearly dropped the phone. I sped across town, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. When I got there, Tommy was sitting in the church office, clinging to his backpack like it was his only lifeline. He ran to me the second he saw me and burst into tears. "Mommy," he sobbed. "Grandma and Grandpa said you didn't want me anymore. They said I had to stay here till you learned your lesson." I held him so tight I thought I'd never let go. Father David explained that my parents left Tommy on the steps with a note in his bag. It read, "Emma needs time to sort out her priorities. We're doing what's best for Tommy." That was their explanation. They abandoned him to teach me a lesson. The police arrived shortly after, and I remember standing next to the officer while she took notes. Her name was Officer Emily Davis. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "So they kidnapped your son and left him at a church because you wouldn't give your brother money?" Hearing it said out loud like that made everything real. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was something dark. This was criminal. That night, Tommy had nightmares. He woke up screaming that they were going to take him again. I stayed up, holding him through the tears, my own rage bubbling just beneath the surface. How could they do this? How could they use my little boy as a pawn in some twisted guilt game? I kept asking myself over and over, what kind of people do that to a child? And the worst part was knowing the answer. The next morning, a social worker named Rachel Martin showed up at my front door. She was kind but professional, her presence a reminder that what happened wasn't just wrong, it was legally serious. She asked questions gently, observed Tommy closely, and assured me they were just making sure he was safe and supported. While she sat with him, my phone kept vibrating with message after message from extended family, accusations, guilt-tripping, and outright lies. My parents had already rewritten the story. According to them, they were simply watching Tommy while I had a mental breakdown. They said I'd exaggerated, that the police and child services were overreacting. Then, as if to double down on the gaslighting, they blocked me on Facebook, along with Eric and half the family. I felt like I was drowning in heartbreak and betrayal, but my best friend Jessica showed up with bags of groceries and arms wide open. "This is insane, Emma," she said as I unloaded the food she brought. "Have they completely lost it?" I could barely respond. "Looks like it," I said, holding back tears. That day I hired a family lawyer named Patricia Clark. She was sharp, calm, and not afraid to tell the hard truth. I also got Tommy into therapy with a gentle Jan named Dr. William Foster. The legal fees, therapy sessions, missed work hours, they drained my savings quickly. But none of it hurt more than seeing my son afraid to close his eyes, scared I'd disappear too. He wouldn't let me leave the room, clung to me like his life depended on it. Even school became terrifying. But then, kindness started trickling in. Tommy's teacher, Sarah, rallied parents for a meal train. The principal added new pickup procedures for safety. Other moms offered play dates so Tommy could feel like a kid again. My clients even gave me room to breathe. "Take care of your boy," one said. Still, the betrayal sat heavy in my chest. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the people who are supposed to love him most chose to hurt him? Patricia pushed me gently but firmly. "Emma, child abandonment is serious. Your parents left a 6-year-old alone at a church. They need to be held accountable." I hesitated. They were my parents. As broken as they were, they raised me. But then, Patricia said something I'll never forget. Kids don't heal by pretending trauma didn't happen. That afternoon, I signed the papers. My hand trembled the entire time. In therapy, Tommy started using action figures to act out scenes. He built a cardboard box and kept putting a small boy figure inside it. Dr. Foster explained that it was how he was processing being left behind. The healing would be slow, and the trauma was real. Meanwhile, my extended family went into attack mode. Cousins sent angry texts. My Aunt Catherine left a voicemail accusing me of destroying the family over a misunderstanding. But in the middle of all that, my dad's sister, Aunt Ellen, reached out. "You're doing the right thing," she said. We met for coffee, and she told me something I never knew. When she and my dad were kids, their parents favored him too. She'd spent decades being overlooked and forgotten. "Breaking this cycle is hard," she said, "but it's worth it." Her words gave me the courage I needed for the court date. Seeing my parents sitting there, looking older and smaller than I remembered, but still unapologetic, was like staring at ghosts. They pled not guilty, saying they left Tommy in a safe place because they were concerned for his well-being. They called me unstable. Outside the courtroom, Eric found me. "Happy now?" he hissed. "Mom and Dad might lose everything, and it's your fault." I stared at him. "They abandoned my son, Eric." He admitted they mortgaged the house for SecureCoin, but still blamed me for not saving them. "You always thought you were better than us." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I knew the truth. A few weeks later, the truth caught up. A news alert popped up. SecureCoin unmasked as massive fraud, millions lost, FBI arrests, and then Agent Michael Reynolds showed up at my door. Eric wasn't just an investor. He was a recruiter. He got paid for bringing in other victims, including me. The agent said Eric even tried to convince my parents to cash out their home equity. A few days later, I got an anonymous email, documents showing Eric knew the coin was shady. He bragged about using our parents' money and even joked about how gullible they were. That was the final straw. I called Patricia and set up a family meeting at her office. I needed closure. My parents showed up looking exhausted. Eric was smug, right up until I pulled out the printed emails. Mom gasped. Dad looked gutted. "We gave you everything," he whispered. "You knew?" I asked Eric. "You knew it was a scam?" he stammered. "It wasn't supposed to crash. I laid it all out. If they ever wanted any relationship with Tommy again, it would be on strict terms. Supervised visits, therapy, and a real apology." They refused. Dad stormed out. Mom followed. Eric stayed. He finally admitted he had gambling debts. I offered him a chance at treatment, but told him he was out of my life. As he walked out, 2 FBI agents approached and took him in for questioning. I watched from the window, not with satisfaction, but with relief. Because I didn't destroy my family, they did. I just stopped covering for them. 6 months later, Tommy and I moved into a new place not too far from our old neighborhood, close enough for him to stay at the same school with the teachers and friends who'd stood by us through the worst of it. On move-in day, he looked around his new room with wide eyes and asked, "Can I hang my space posters?" I smiled for what felt like the first real time in ages and said, "You bet, buddy. Anywhere you want." It felt like a fresh start we both needed. Eric avoided jail time by cooperating with the FBI. He got probation, was ordered into rehab and counseling, and had to do community service. My parents ended up losing their house. They just couldn't keep up after taking out that second mortgage. But with the help of my cousin Susan, they found a small apartment in a nearby town. At first they rejected the idea of therapy, clinging to the belief that everything had been misunderstood. But eventually, slowly, something shifted. Mom started sending Tommy simple birthday and holiday cards. No guilt, no drama, just soft messages like, "Thinking of you," and "Hope you're happy." One day Tommy looked up at me holding one of the cards and asked, "Is Grandma not mad at me anymore?" My heart cracked and I said, "She never was, sweetie. She just made a really big mistake." With Dr. Foster's help, Tommy began learning how to set healthy boundaries, even at such a young age. After a few more gentle notes from Mom, he asked if he could have a short supervised visit with her. I agreed cautiously. We met at a small cafe. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. There were no tears, no apologies, no grand declarations, just some awkward laughs and ice cream cones. And honestly, that was enough. Dad's been more resistant. He's only called me twice. Both times short, stiff conversations about logistics or taxes, like we were business acquaintances instead of family. But at least he didn't yell. Eric, on the other hand, wrote me a letter from his treatment center. It wasn't filled with excuses. He admitted to the addiction, the scams, and how deep he'd fallen into his own mess. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and maybe that's what made it easier to read. I wrote back, wished him luck, and told him I hoped he stayed clean, but I didn't invite him back into our lives. Some doors stay closed, and that's okay. Work's been better. I landed 2 new clients, hired a part-time assistant, and for the first time in years, I've been able to balance work and motherhood without drowning. Jessica and her husband David became more than friends. They became family. One day over lunch, I asked them to be Tommy's godparents. They both cried, then hugged me like we'd known each other forever. We started building new traditions. Friday night game nights, Saturday volunteer days, random weekend hikes or beach days. One warm evening, while watching fireflies from the porch, Tommy turned to me and asked, "Mom, do you think people can really change?" I looked at him and said, "With effort, yeah." But the best part is, we've changed. We're stronger now. He nodded with that little boy wisdom and said, and we've got our chosen family now, people who love us for real. That moment stuck with me. Later that night, after he drifted off to sleep under glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, I sat on the edge of his bed and realized something I'd never been taught as a kid. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival. They're how we protect the love that matters most. Family can hurt you in ways no one else can, but if you're lucky and brave, you can also build a family that heals. At our housewarming, the living room was packed with people who'd shown up when it counted. Jessica, David, Sarah from school, Dr. Foster, Aunt Ellen, even a couple of Tommy's classmates' parents. There was no tension, no pretending, just peace, messy, hard-earned, and real. And honestly, that's the kind of love I want my son to grow up around. So now I'm asking you, what would you have done? Pressed charges against your own parents? Given your brother the money? Let me know in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories like this, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: boundaries aren't about cutting people off, they're about protecting what truly matters. Thanks for being here and hearing our story. I hope it helps you, especially if you're walking through your own storm right now.